So thanks a lot for the invitation. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. And thanks to Carmen for being here. It will be a privilege to hear what she thinks about my paper. So I'll be talking about the middle class. Most of the things we'll be hearing today will be about poor people, so I'll be talking about the middle class. We heard yesterday there has been a divergent path in the income of the middle class and the top 1% or 0.1% of the population, and yesterday we had a discussion of the reasons why this. So the big story here is a divergent path in earnings, but there is also a difference. The rich not only earn more money, but they also invest their money better. And this contributes to explaining the income inequality. There are estimates of how important this thing is. Not the most important component, but it is a component. So my proposal tries to address this issue, tries to address the issue that the rich are better investors than the middle class. So I'm trying to reduce the second component. So when I'm thinking about the typical target person of my proposal, I'm thinking about this guy. So from the haircut, that's my father. We have similar hairstyle. So when I started studying economics in the mid-1980s, I was learning stuff, so I went and I told my father, what do you do with your savings? And he says, I don't have much, but whatever I have, I keep it in my bank account. And I told him that's not a very good idea. At that point, real interest rates in Italy were negative. I said maybe you should do something else with your savings. So for once in a lifetime, he listened to me, he went to the bank, and then came back and said, yeah, I talked with the guy in the bank, he said that you're right. So I did some stuff, so I bought a couple of stocks of Fiat. So my family is from Torino, Fiat is based in Torino. So some other Italian stock, and then this guy from the bank told me that they had some nice product and I should buy this product, and that would be. So around 1985, the banker told my father, keep 1/3 of your money in cash and about 2/3 in some mumbo jumbo, which were a couple of Italian stocks, and this product managed by the bank. So I told him, that might be not the best idea. People say that the best thing you should do, you should buy index stuff, which cover the whole market, the worldwide market, and which have low management fees. That's not the best possible idea. But anyway, so my father made some mistakes, but then if you read the literature, his mistakes is very common. So there are 3 mistakes that he did. The first one was not participating in risky assets, so he was keeping his cash, his savings in cash. And this is if you look at data across country. Sorry. It's disappeared. So these are cross-country data. So the blue bars are country averages. So you see in almost every advanced economy, less than 50% of the population actually owns stocks, either through direct ownership or through a mutual fund. Only in Sweden this share is bigger. But even if you look at the richest component, the richest 50% of the population, in almost every country except Sweden and the US, less than 50% of the richest 50% own any stock. If you look at my country, Italy, less than 20% of the richest 50% of Italian households own any stock. So that's the first investment mistake. It's a common mistake. The second mistake that my father did, which is again a common mistake, he under-diversified. He bought 2 or 3 stocks, so he kept all his eggs in one basket, and he bought Italian stocks. Not only he bought Italian stocks, he bought stocks for a company based in Torino. That's again a fact. People tend to buy the stocks of the companies they know that there are companies in their own city or even companies they work for. So if they get fired, if the company goes bust, they lose their job and they lose their money. Great choice. And so there is home bias. And the third thing is sort of listen to the banker, but the incentive of the banker are different from the incentive of my father. The banker wants to maximize fees, my father wants to maximize return. So that was the test. So when he bought this sort of product. So this again, it's a common thing. So there is evidence that these mistakes are made by a lot of people. Then you might tell me it might not be much. Actually, so here the authority on this is John Campbell here at Harvard. It's very hard to monetize the cost of these investment mistakes because people don't like to reveal their financial position. But a great thing of taxes, in Sweden they tax your total wealth, so there is data. So John Campbell was able to compute the cost of investment mistakes for Swedish households. And now you should remember the Swedish households are the most financially sophisticated households. And so maybe the cost of investment mistakes of Swedish households is sort of a lower bound for the cost of investment mistakes of households in other advanced economies. Anyway, so Swedish households lose about 1% of GDP each year. In the US, just from managing stuff, you spend about 191 billion per year, so this is Ken French. So if you use 1% as a lower bound of investment mistakes, and you apply this to the GDP of advanced economies, you get about 450 billion, which is, these are the billions on the sidewalk. Okay? So why people do this investment mistake? Part of it is lack of information. So my father did not invest until his son started studying economics and told him, you should go and invest. But that's only part of the story. There is a lot of literature in behavioral economics and behavioral finance that says that we are very anxious when we deal with our money. We don't like to talk with other people about our money. We work very hard to earn our money, and then we're very protective of our money. And so when we make an investment decision, our mind is not working in the best state. There is loss aversion, which was first studied and popularized by Daniel Kahneman. So we're very afraid of losing our money. So this creates a lot of risk aversion, which again prevents us from putting some of our money, of course not all of it, into risky assets. There is myopia. The fact that returns will be in a long period of time, you have to make a decision now. Again, this leads to distorted decision. And then again, there are the evil bankers, which have incentives which are maybe not aligned with our best interest. So what is my proposal? My proposal, it's very easy. Now, I don't know what's the case in the US, but in Europe, if you go to a bank and you want to invest some money, they make you read a lot of stuff. And this stuff, you have to answer some questions. This stuff, the objective of this stuff is try to understand what's your level of risk tolerance, and then on the basis of this thing, the financial advisors will give you some advice. This does not resolve the problems, because this stuff that you have to read is very long. Nobody understands anything, number one. And second, at the end, the person who gives you the advice is the financial advisor who might have distorted incentive. So what is my proposal is just to do a flyer, simple flyer, before when you go and decide to invest, you read it. There is a half a page with this very short description on the investment mistakes that people make. And then a very simple default option. You're 35-year-old, your financial savings are X time your monthly earning, you should allocate X% of your savings to a risky asset, and there are this list of funds which are low-cost index funds that tracks a worldwide equity markets. This is a list of them. Pick one of them, whichever you want, and that's it. And then, of course, you can do whatever you want. This is not a compulsory thing. People can be free to do whatever they want, but the flyer will tell the potential investor that there is some potential conflict of interest, and that might be if the financial advisor tells him to buy some complicated product, maybe this will benefit more the financial advisor than the client, and then you do whatever you want. Okay? So it's a rule of thumb policy. Why in my work? First of all, it's salient. So if you do financial education with somebody and this guy goes invest in 6 months, he would have forgotten everything. So this is done at the moment you invest. It's salient. Second, it's simple. So again, there is a lot of evidence in behavioral finance and behavioral economics that simple things work. And third, it creates common knowledge. So I'm going to spend half a minute on this and then I close. Now, I've been with my father and with other people talking with bankers, and then the bankers there start saying, you should buy this stuff will give you, it's nonsense. It goes against whatever we learned by reading papers on finance. But in the moment you are there and you're already uncomfortable discussing your money, and there is a guy who's telling you to buy something, there is a huge psychological cost in confronting the financial advisors and telling him, listen, whatever you're telling me is nonsense. I've been talking with friends who have PhD in economics, and I've described exactly the same situation. With my simple thing, you sort of reverse the psychological cost, because you create what in game theory, after Robert Aumann, is known as a common knowledge situation. Now the financial advisors know that you have just read a piece of paper telling you that whatever advice the guy is giving you is probably wrong. And you know that he knows that you know, and so on and so forth. So that creates some discomfort in the financial advisor in giving you an advice which is clearly in contrast with something you just read. And And so in this sort of psychological tension, instead of being on you in terms of contrasting the financial advisors, it goes in the other direction. So in a sense, these sort of things is what I get Magritte in mind when he told us this is not a pipe. So the paper is 36 pages long. There is a section about the growth effect, but I don't have time. So let me just conclude going back to my father. So if in 1985 he had done what the banker told him, so if he had 100, by now he would have in real term about 200, which is not bad. But if he had bought the worldwide equity market, he would have 400. So these are the cost of investment mistakes. Thank you.
I think I will sit. Well, I very much enjoyed this paper, and so what I'd like to do is divide my remarks into 3 parts, just complementing Ugo's presentation. The first part, I'm going to talk a little bit about also why this issue that he's addressing is so important from a macro perspective. That is to say, trying, as the title suggests, to nudge savings. The second, I am going to try to fill in some holes or complement some things that were left unsaid about individuals saving abroad, for instance. It's a big issue. And the third one, I am going to nudge Ugo on the issue of why do we observe what we observe in terms of investment decisions. Is it all the individual? Is it all the... not that I disagree with anything you said, but I think also individuals, and I will deal with this later on, individuals are reacting to incentives, and often it's not just the investment advisors that may have conflicting incentives with individuals, but the governments themselves. And so that's where I'm going. So let me start with the issue of why I think Ugo's topic is extremely important, and it is important for not just if it is important for advanced economies, it may be even more important for developing. The issue of the dearth of domestic saving is a significant impediment to macro stability in many dimensions. Why do I say that? Well, foreign saving, i.e. international capital flows, are fickle, they're volatile, and they're procyclical. And what we observe often is that in countries where the pool of domestic saving, for a variety of reasons, is low, their capacity to absorb bad shocks are limited. So right now we take a look at what's going on with emerging markets. Again, we can compare, these are rough comparisons, we can compare how badly Latin America is doing vis-a-vis Asia. And there are many reasons for that, but certainly one reason is that when domestic savings are low, if you want to reduce your current account deficit, investment winds up taking a big hit with deleterious consequences for growth. So the issue being addressed here is not just, Ugo's paper importantly takes the issue of individual welfare, consumption smoothing, risk sharing, diversification, all those issues that are very important from a personal vantage point, but there's also big macro issues here in which most countries can use a nudge in their saving rates. I just finished a paper on Greece that I presented in Brookings a couple of weeks ago, which actually made a very similar point. One of the recurring problems of Greece has been a dearth of domestic saving. This brings me to an issue that I think, Ugo, you can bring into your discussion. How much of what we observe, it may be so more, I think, for the middle income households and for the higher income household, how much of what we observe is really individuals that are insufficiently diversified, that they're not taking enough risk, and how much is that biased by the fact that in a lot of the high-income countries, some of the very provocative work, for example, by Gabriel Zucman, has shown that individuals are actually saving a lot. It's just not recorded in their own countries. That we know relatively little about what is the composition of those savings offshore. So I think I would like to see the paper also, address to what extent we may be underestimating, if you will, the amount of diversification and the amount of risk-taking simply because some of the channels that diversification take may not be legal. That's sort of in a nutshell. What I would like to say a couple of words about, since this is also a conference on that has a development dimension as well, is I very much like what Ugo's putting on the table because it is a relatively low cost, highly informative, feasible. And I'd like to just say a couple of words of how that might transfer to developing countries before I close my remarks. I think when you get to the lowest income countries, this is not the issue. I think the issue, you have a significant proportion of the population living close to subsistence. Actually, Jonathan Austria and I, 2 decades ago, wrote about the issue that in effect consumption and saving decisions are not that sensitive to interest rate changes because so much of the consumption saving decision is driven by subsistence consideration. But I think your technology can actually transfer if we think about how to train or how to instruct individuals to manage precautionary saving, which are very important in low-income countries where incomes are particularly volatile. Let me turn, though, since I am almost out of time, to an issue that I want to address, that what Ugo, one of his last slides in which said, okay, there are these common mistakes. Individuals under-diversified, they hold too many riskless assets and cash, and so on. Now, I ask you, is that all behavioral, or is it also induced by government policies? Let me give you a concrete example. In Spain, pension funds, before the crisis, held about 50% of their assets in government debt. Now they hold 97%. Okay? Now, the rates of return on pension funds that are managed not by private individuals, but by presumably people that know something, the rate of returns on pension funds are abysmal. And often shaped by regulatory decisions. They're often shaped by tax decisions. They're shaped by a lot of policy, not just individuals not being fully informed. In effect, the Economist not that long ago ran an article on the rates of returns on pension funds over the long run, which really made one weep. I mean, I think if my now deceased 16-year-old dog had invested 16 years ago, his rate of return would have been superior to what most of these pension funds recorded. And so I want to challenge you to, think also about it's not just what can be done to inform the public, but also what kinds of distortions, apart from, and again, it's not that I do not completely, agree with your issues about, underinformed decisions and risk aversion and so on, but I think there's also a layer of policy issues that account for this observed outcome that yields, billions on the sidewalk. And I'll stop there.